Good morning. Welcome to the Missouri Nuclear Summit. My name is Moon Choi, and I serve as the president of the University of Missouri. To begin, I want to thank Mr. Kurt Schaefer, the director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, the National Governors Association, and the Department of Energy for hosting this very important event. We have so many leaders today from the nuclear industry who are gathered to find new solutions. We're constantly reminded about the growing energy demands, not only in the United States, but all across the world. At the same time, just in the United States, this year alone, we will hear about 2 million Americans being diagnosed with cancer. Now, there's a unifying theme in my mind of using innovations in nuclear science to meet not only the needs of a growing energy demand across the world, but also saving and improving lives. And that's why we're here today, to find that strategic focus and collaboration that will bring the innovations and breakthroughs right in the heart of America and throughout the United States. This will require not only advanced R&D, but also innovative financing, pragmatic policies, and effective training. Here at Mizzou, we are home to a research reactor that has been operating for over 58 years. Our reactor, known as MURR, is the most powerful university research reactor. But more importantly than that, we are the only producers of 4 radioisotopes that are used for treating cancers of thyroid, prostate, liver, and pancreatic cancers. We have a workforce that is 300 plus strong that is dedicated to each and every day developing new medical isotopes or theranostics. Thanks to the strong support of our governor, Mike Kehoe, who will be here today to speak to all of you and elected leaders, we are on track to build a new, larger $1.3 billion facility that we call NextGen MURR. Our vision is to create the epicenter of nuclear medicine, ranging from incubation space to manufacturing plants to logistics center right here in the center of America. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I look forward to the fruitful discussions and collaborations that will result. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Kurt Schaefer, who is the director of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and he is a graduate of the University of Missouri and a true proponent of nuclear innovation. Please welcome Director Kurt Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the University of Missouri, especially President Choi, for hosting us. You know, I want to let people kind of know how this came up. Shortly after I started this position as the director at the beginning of the year, we had gotten a request from the U.S. Department of Energy and the National Governors Association if Missouri wanted to be part of a study to essentially bring nuclear back into the equation and have a realistic discussion about how, not only in Missouri, but in the United States, we're going to meet projected 3% annual demand in energy use without carbon emissions and other things. And really, when you look at that equation, nuclear is really what comes to the forefront in terms of dispatchable power that doesn't have an associated carbon emission. And it really hasn't been in the discussion for a while. And so we were very glad to do that. And this was working with the governor and having talked to the governor extensively about energy issues and knowing how passionate he is about making sure that Missouri has not only the energy that it needs for its current use, but for growing into the future, both for existing Missouri citizens and businesses, as well as attracting new business. I knew we wanted to be a part of this. Initially, that group was only going to award this to 3 states, and the response that they got across the country from multiple states was so overwhelming, they ended up picking 7, and we're very honored to be part of that 7. And so a big part of that equation is the U.S. Department of Energy. And so with us today is Joe Alexander, who serves as the Chief of Staff in the Department of Energy's Grid Development Office, providing tactical guidance and supporting strategic direction for the United States in that field. Before joining DOE, Joe served on both the legislative branch and congressional and executive branch offices in D.C. He's a Midwest native. He grew up in a nuclear power plant community. He went to the University of Illinois. We won't hold that against him, where he was a student athlete in the Big Ten Conference. Joe has been very, very helpful with this effort, and I would ask you please make him feel welcome.
Well, good morning, Missouri. Wow, what a great turnout for the Missouri Nuclear Summit. It's great to be with you all. Mr. President, thank you for playing a kind host. You know, we're kind of interrelated here, aren't we? As it was alluded to, I'm from the east side, if you will, the east side of the Mississippi River, from another state. Don't hold that against me. Visiting with the president, I was reviewing his outstanding resume. His academic resume is a little bit more impressive than mine, I'll leave it at that, but we are both graduates of the University of Illinois, and so we had an opportunity to talk about things going on here at Mizzou and interesting things between the SEC conference and the Big Ten conference, so it's certainly an exciting time. So it's great to be here. Anytime I'm in a neighboring state, Missouri feels like home to me, quite frankly. We all have kind of inflection points in our life, don't we? And that's when something significant happens. And so I send greetings from the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and Secretary Chris Wright. One of those inflection points for me was about a decade ago in a different Springfield. I met Donald J. Trump about a year before he got elected. And I've had the opportunity now to travel about 35, 36, 37 states with him, the vice president, or members of the First Family. And one of the interesting places I went, had an opportunity to be at, was Keokuk, Iowa. And why is Keokuk, Iowa important or relevant to the conversation that we're going to have here, we're all going to be a part of? Well, from 1910 to 1913, there was an untrained engineer. He was literally self-taught by the name of Hugh Cooper. Hugh Cooper, in that time duration, built a hydroelectric dam on the Mississippi River. Imagine all the tools, the knowledge, the construction equipment that they didn't have in that time era of 1910. Well, the remarkable thing about that renewable source of energy is that Ameren, Missouri is still using that technology, and you're still reaping the benefits of what Hugh Cooper and others of that time had the opportunity, and quite frankly, the vision to serve the residents of two different states, and certainly here in Missouri. So what I want to challenge you with today is it's a remarkable time to be alive. It really, really is. The Department of Energy recently, actually just last week, we were able to publish a report called a Resource Adequacy Report. The Resource Adequacy Report talked about what energy demands that is currently forthcoming and facing our country. I just down here before we started this, there is interest. Don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but there's interest. And a couple of gentlemen talked to me about it, was visiting and expressing their interest in an AI center right here in the Columbia area. Because ladies and gentlemen, we need to build those AI centers out all across our country. That is going to take a tremendous amount of energy to produce the AI centers of the future. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to do that. So what the president has talked about, as well as Secretary Wright, is the need to really blow the doors off energy production in the country. I find myself at Department of Energy we're for all forms of energy. There are certain places, I happen to be one of them, unfortunately, that they're removing coal plants offline. We can't afford to lose any megawatts of energy production with AI centers coming online, because as those coal plants get reduced, we're going into a deficit. So we actually have less megawatts being produced all across the country. And obviously you're very focused on your state, as you should be, but ISOs don't naturally, with a few exceptions, follow state boundary lines. So what you're doing here in Missouri affects all across the country in the demands. With no disrespect to your outstanding residents of your great state, you have assets here in your state that, quite frankly, are part of the national defense. I was visiting with the governor here, and we appreciate Governor Kehoe's vision for creating more energy. You have Whiteman Air Force Base. Isn't it remarkable what those pilots, including a Missouri National Guard pilot, did? Let's give them a round of applause for our pilots there at Whiteman. Utterly remarkable what they did in doing that mission that they had in front of themselves. That's something you should be very proud of. But it's literally, folks, energy production is literally a national security issue. So the Department of Energy is excited to be representative. I have colleagues here with me today that we look forward to talking to you, engaging with you. We want to stand with you and support you and prod and encourage as your state, and you're full of challenges. I keep my eye on what's going on here in Missouri. You have your challenges before you. But the challenge I would leave you with, in the very same fashion that Hugh Cooper so many years ago, 100 plus years ago, met the demands of his time, may we meet ours. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. As I mentioned previously, Governor Kehoe is really kind of what made all this come together. He's been a huge part of this effort. Having talked to the governor, both in his previous roles as a senator, we served in the Missouri Senate together, and in his role as lieutenant governor before he was sworn in as Missouri's 58th governor in January. Energy has always been a key issue for him. He and I share the fact that we both carried bills dealing with very important energy issues when we were in the Senate. It's a field that we're familiar with. And really, when you kind of know that space and you look forward, you see there's a lot of challenges ahead, and nuclear certainly needs to be in that discussion, which is why we're having the event today. It's why Governor Kehoe thought it was so important to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and having a realistic discussion about what nuclear is and what it isn't. And so hopefully today we've got a series of really, really good presentations and panels that'll be very candid and very open about the realities of what the energy demands are going to be in Missouri and in the United States for the decades to come, as well as how we intend to fill those and what our options are. So please join me in welcoming the 58th governor of the state of Missouri, Mike Kehoe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Director Schaefer. You should not stand, because I've been told a standing ovation is always a reason for people to sneak out the back door. And since you've already heard from some great folks, that might be the case. Thank you, Director Schaefer. As Kurt mentioned, he and I have not only served together, we've worked together for a long time and been friends. And in case you guys haven't met Kurt Schaefer, he's a guy with a lot of energy, and he represents like a little nuclear body within himself. So we're happy with that. And as I tell Kurt and his assistant Jake Buxton, our deputy director, and Emily, who did a great job putting this together. Can we give Emily Wilbers a round of applause? When it comes to energy, we need to move at business speed, not bureaucratic speed. And those are two different speeds, because that's what the demand is on, quite frankly, in this area. Thank you, Joe Alexander, for coming from the U.S. Department of Energy. We're great to have the feds here with us as well. They play a vital role when you're developing energy strategies and what you're looking to move your state forward. We're grateful for that. Moon Choi has been just a stalwart person, not just here at the University of Missouri, but across the state, in trying to make people understand, A, what the university and its four-campus system has to offer, but also what nuclear is about, as you know. And he mentioned our reactor here, MURR, and hopefully someday a second reactor, changing the lives, saving the lives of millions of people across the state. And I'm grateful we have Moon Choi with us. And then many House and Senate members are here today interested in the space. And it's great for me to be able to work with men and women who not only understand what our economic development is all about, but what the need for reliable baseload energy is all about. And I'm grateful for those men and ladies who serve with us in the House and Senate, and for their interest in this today. We want to really welcome everybody to the summit, because this is, what we need to do. We need to get collectively together to figure out where we're going to go. It's a priority of mine to make sure Missouri has ample power for the future, and we know nuclear technology can be a critical piece in meeting that goal. As you heard Kurt say, he was already in the Senate, but my first year in the Senate, I carried a bill to expand nuclear capacity in the state, and it met with a little bit of resistance. And I was a freshman, and it was a large piece of legislation. But that's how long this conversation has been going on in the state, and in other states, quite frankly. And the only thing that's happened is the need has increased. And so we're grateful that you're here today to help us figure out how Missouri meets those needs. And so I'm thank you for being part and be willing to listen and collaborate with each other. When I sit down with companies looking to expand or invest in Missouri, the conversation is always the same. It's energy, then it's energy, then it's energy. They want to know that we can deliver this baseload power demand. And all of you here today play some sort of role in those conversations. Nuclear is definitely a critical part of ensuring what we can do for these businesses. And really, it's about reliability, but it's also about affordability for our consumers. Too many times consumer groups, as a matter of fact, I had a consumer group come to me, you probably are aware, not me, the House and Senate members here today. I was fortunate enough to sign the bill, worked very hard along with our energy providers and our stakeholders to pass Senate Bill 4. And I had a consumer group person come to me during session and said, you know, we don't like Senate Bill 4 because it's going to cause the cost of energy to our consumers to go up. And I said, well, let me just ask you a question. Do you tell your consumers that energy is not going to go up? Oh, yeah, that's what we tell them. I said, well, you're lying to your consumers because there's absolutely no way to continue to power the world and continue to have electric cars, electric phones, IT, all the things that we have. No matter who you are, what block or city you live in Missouri or anywhere in the nation, and think that energy prices are going to stay stable or go down. And so when you look at what Senate Bill 4 did, in my opinion, it's predictable. It's not spikes, it's a ramp. And it is predictable, and it allows more baseload power, which, as anybody in this room knows, you're the experts, can help keep residential rates down. So we think that that is essential to what our state needs. And meeting our energy demand within our own borders is really what we're all about. We think that ensures reliability and predictable costs for Missouri citizens. We cannot rely on other states, our countries, to generate enough electricity for us. We need and must have the capability to generate our own power right here in Missouri. Our economic development, public health, and public safety absolutely depend on this. Many of the major economic development projects you've seen in the headlines are large energy-intensive investments, ones that create high-paying jobs and help ensure a thriving economy. In the past, Missouri has actually lost out to large business investments and expansions because of our current capacity and limitations. Ford Motor Company and Panasonic being two of the examples. We swung and missed because we didn't have that utility infrastructure that they so sorely needed. And as a Ford dealer, I really wanted Ford here. So does anybody know that I'm not a professional politician? I'm actually a car dealer. Does that make you more comfortable today if you're in the nuclear space? Expected energy demand for individual new business projects has grown from an average of 3.2 megawatts in 2019 to 162 in 2023. I think, look at that. It's unbelievable. Energy discussions like the ones you're having here today at this nuclear summit will help attract more private sector investment and create more high-paying jobs for Missourians. Thank you, Moon. So we're leveraging the expertise in this room of elected officials, industry leaders, and innovators to explore and discuss the opportunities with our state and our country and our state's economy. And I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution. We have with us today, you have investor-owned utilities, municipal utilities, co-ops, et cetera. And I believe it's a combination of those utility providers working together to look at what our large-scale baseload energy is going to be. They've, in the past, worked together somewhat by relying on transmission issues with MISOs and different things that help with transmission lines and transmission issues. But I really would love to see, and I know they're ready to do that, take the companies that we have that provide our states, the entities that are all great friends of mine and all do a great job in their own respective needs, figure out a way to work together that's a quicker solution and more immediate. And when it comes to the availability of people who know how to build these plants, I think Missouri sets itself up from anybody else across the nation. Whether it's career and technical training, which we have incredible programs across the state, many career and technical institutions and community colleges with some sort of nuclear program that really sets it up. Matter of fact, one of the young men who runs MUR, the actual reactor, started in a nuclear program at a state technical college in Lynn, Missouri before he got to MUR. And I love that story because he came here and worked, and then he worked at the university and ended up getting a master's and ended up running the plant. And so between that collaboration between career and technical and then the University of Missouri and some of our university campuses that offer this technical training, we have the people and we can have the knowledge to be able to not only build but to run these plants. And it's a private sector kind of investment opportunity too with training. For instance, we have a training center in St. Louis, a $50 million training center that 562 pipe fitters built. And companies like you'll hear from later on today, the Corrigan companies, actually invest in hundreds, now thousands of trainees in the workforce on how to actually do what needs to be done in high-skilled jobs to actually build these facilities. And the investment that the private sector makes, whether a Corrigan company or one of our other great companies, organized labor makes in these that are skilled jobs that understand how to deliver a job on time, under budget, with great training. Those are all the pieces Missouri has. We just need to take that puzzle now and snap it all together. And believe me, it's definitely possible here in Missouri. So I want to thank the energy leaders, nuclear experts, and our government partners here today for your time and your insight. Your expertise will shape decisions that will impact generations to come. You're going to hear from Craig Piercy with the American Nuclear Society. I'm really grateful for that organization helping put this together. But Craig is one who's going to deliver a message that, and I'm not trying to steal his thunder, Kurt Schaefer and I talked about this morning. It's interesting when you talk about nuclear, because I've just got back from a trade mission in Europe, and we talked about baseload energy. As you know, they're large in nuclear energy over there. And it's kind of a generational thing. It's, you know, if you're 40 or 45 and older, you think about nuclear, and you think about it as nuclear war and weapons and things that might scare you. And if you're under 40 years old, that's all you know. The younger generation, that they know clean technology, they know reliable technology, they know that long-term technology, what nuclear can do for a state and for our power grid. And I'm grateful that Craig and his team are here for the summit as well. So thank you for joining us in this important discussion. We're happy to host you to Missouri. We're the Show Me State. We're going to show you what we're all about. I think you're going to find out we're ready. We're ready to move at business speed, and we're building an energy future that keeps our nation strong. God bless each and every one of you, and thank you so much for being here. Somebody's coming next.
Good morning. I'm Mike Sutherland. I serve as the Vice President of the Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives. Before I introduce the next speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to tell you just a little bit about Missouri Electric Cooperatives. I work with the association, and our association was founded in 1937 and is headquartered in Jefferson City. We represent Missouri's 47 Missouri member-owned electric cooperatives. Together, these cooperatives power 80% of Missouri's land mass and serve more than 800,000 homes, farms, and businesses across the state. Missouri's electric cooperative network operates through a coordinated three-tier system. Tier 1 is our 40 local distribution cooperatives that deliver electricity to consumers. Tier 2 is our 6 regional transmission cooperatives, and at Tier 3, providing the power is Associated Electric Cooperative, the non-for-profit member-owned generation cooperative based in Springfield, Missouri. Each cooperative operates under the same democratic rule, locally governed by a board of directors elected by its member owners. Missouri's electric co-ops remain committed to delivering affordable, reliable electricity with a focus on service, not profit. That commitment to reliability is what makes this nuclear summit so significant. We applaud Governor Kehoe, the U.S. Department of Energy, Director Schaefer, and the Department of Natural Resources and its Division of Energy for their forward-thinking and their efforts to bring us together today to talk about these important issues. Today's summit is providing a foundation of information that will spur discussion and action. As we continue to build our base of knowledge this morning, we have an expert who will make this complicated topic easier to understand, even to me. Doug True is the Nuclear Energy Institute's Chief Nuclear Officer and Senior Vice President of Generation and Suppliers. Doug is a veteran of the nuclear industry with more than 40 years of experience in nuclear regulatory policy and implementation, playing a substantial role in U.S. policies and regulatory activities ranging from the industry response to challenges like Fukushima and 9/11 to major contributions to the formation and implementation of risk-informed regulation. Prior to joining NEI, he served as Executive Vice President of the Power Services Group at Jensen Hughes Incorporated. In this position, he was responsible for one of the largest specialty engineering organizations in the nuclear industry, covering a broad range of analysis, testing, design, and research consulting services. Doug previously served on the NEI Board of Directors, has been a contributor to NEI, Electric Power Research Institute, Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, and federal government guidance on a broad spectrum of technological and regulatory issues. This morning, please join me in welcoming Doug True to the stage for his presentation, Nuclear 101.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I'm glad to be here. Excited about the turnout today. This is amazing to talk in Missouri about nuclear energy. I want to start a little bit with a background on the Nuclear Energy Institute so that you kind of understand where I'm coming from. And then I've been asked today to provide a little bit of an overview on nuclear energy in the United States and sort of effectively a nuclear 101. So the Nuclear Energy Institute is a trade association that supports the nuclear industry. We have over 350 members across the entire value chain of nuclear energy, from the miners that take the uranium out of the ground to the companies that convert that uranium into fuel we can use in the reactors, to the companies that have designed and built the current fleet of reactors, as well as the new reactors we intend to build, the owners and operators of these reactors, the suppliers that provide components and services and parts to those plants, as well as the companies that deal with the byproducts and waste from these facilities, as well as the decommissioning. So we run the whole gamut. We have over 100 universities that are members as well that support the education of the nuclear workforce. And so we bring a pretty broad perspective on what's going on in the industry, and I'd like to share some of that with you. So one of the things that I like to start with is just sort of giving folks a perspective on the nuclear industry. It's sort of, I would say, an invisible giant in our economy, in that for about the last 30 years, it's provided nearly 1/5 of all electricity to the United States. Most people have no concept that we have nearly 100 nuclear power plants in the United States that operate efficiently, safely, and reliably, and really provide a foundation for our electricity grid. It's the largest source of emission-free electricity, larger than solar and larger than wind, and it runs at an amazing rate of performance. In fact, we have an independent organization, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, that oversees our performance and in fact coordinates across the world. Their leader says to us that the U.S. fleet is the highest performing nuclear fleet in the world. And we're very proud of that and intend that to be the future we have ahead of us as well. We currently have 94 reactors operating in 53 states, one here in Missouri, the Callaway plant. And we have actually two plants that are coming back into service, potentially a third, but two are in the process of going through a restart from being shut down a few years ago. We expect by the end of next year, we might have both of those plants back online and bring it up to 96. And as I mentioned, there's another plant that's seriously considering restart and may be up in the next few years. Also, a lot of interest in new nuclear. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of my presentation. It offers a lot of different opportunities for nuclear and for our economy. Speaking of economic impacts, while we only operate in 53 states, the benefits of nuclear actually spread across the entire country. You can see the darker states on this map sort of represent the places where the most benefit is, but that's because the most plants are there. But we have suppliers and other entities that support the industry across all the United States. And so these impacts really extend beyond just the local area around those plants. Jobs are a big thing for nuclear. It takes a number of folks to operate these plants, and those kind of jobs are jobs that last for a career. The plants typically are built in a 5 to 10 year time frame. They operate for, most of the plants we have today will operate out to 80 years. So we have many of our nuclear plants where we have generational turnover. You know, the father or mother started at the plant when it started up, and now their kids are working there, and they'll see it through their entire career. So it's a long-term proposition providing stable, well-paying jobs in the local community, as well as taxes and other benefits to the local community. There we go. One of the things I want to talk about on nuclear energy is what we term energy density. This is important because as we talk about the demand that's ahead of us that the governor mentioned for new energy, energy density is going to become more and more of an issue. It takes land area to provide solar and wind. It takes mining area to mine coal. But nuclear has a very high energy density. And this graphic is intended to sort of help get in your minds what I mean by that. So on the left-hand side, you can see a hand holding a small pellet. That's a pellet of uranium oxide fuel. It's the kind of fuel that goes into a nuclear reactor. They're stacked into tubes, and there are many, many tubes in each reactor. But the energy that can come out of that one pellet will power all the electricity you need for 1 year. Which means that if you think over your lifetime, and you took each of those pellets that was needed to power your year, you could fit that in a soda can. So we're not talking about gallons and gallons of energy or millions of cubic feet of natural gas. We're talking about a very small quantity. This is also important as we think about what was often talked about with nuclear waste, in that the quantity of waste that's generated is exactly those little pellets. And those are kept in those tubes, they're put into a storage container, and they can be kept for a very, very long time in that form. We think well over 100 years. Ultimately, they need to be disposed of. But just to give you a sense of this energy density issue, all of the fuel from all of the plants that have ever operated in the United States would fit within a super Walmart. So we're not talking about a large quantity of waste. It's an amount that can be easily dealt with. And I'll come back to that later, likely in some conversations about this. But it's a very dense energy source. It means we can produce a lot of energy in a very small area, and we can do it in a lot of different places. The second thing I want to mention about nuclear is its high reliability. The current operating fleet, those 94 reactors I talked about before, has an overall capacity factor of 92%. Capacity factor is if you have a plant that says it can produce X number of megawatts of electricity, when you look at it over the year, what percentage of that total did it actually produce? And nuclear runs well above 90%. What that means is these plants are running 24/7, 365. The amount of time that they are not producing is generally the time when we're shut down to refuel the plants, basically refuel the tank with fuel, with fresh fuel, so that we can start back up and run. Many of the plants run from the time they restart from that refueling outage all the way until the next refueling outage without ever shutting down. That ability to run that long without interruption is what provides that foundation of base load power to the current grid. Other forms are listed here on this Department of Energy graph. Sources like wind and solar are more intermittent. You get wind, you get solar power when the sun's shining, you get wind power when the wind's blowing. And so when you think about trying to meet an energy demand that's growing rapidly, you need to build more wind and solar in order to produce an equivalent amount of energy than you would nuclear power. And that's making companies, industrial companies, hyperscalers and data centers very interested in how nuclear could fit into this future because it provides that reliable power over time. Speaking of demand, and the governor hit on some of this, and there are many extrapolations of what we think the electricity demand is, and even this one I'm showing here, the orange bar there, shows a pretty wide distribution of what the projections might be. But the two important things to take from this are, if you look at the line on the left-hand side, that's what the demand has been in the past. And it's been pretty steady, pretty flat over the last 5 or 10 years, 20 years even. And you know, some ups and downs, mostly driven by economic conditions in the United States, with a little slight upward trend, but generally flat. And now all of a sudden we're entering into this era where the projections are that that's going to go up dramatically. And it's important to understand what's driving that. Some of that is economic growth. It's just the normal growth that is built in maybe on the left-hand side. But a lot of it is coming from industrial loads. This is the reshoring and manufacturing that's going on. And those companies, they want power 24/7 to be able to run their facilities. Also, data centers and artificial intelligence are an important driver. We all live by our phones and our connections to the internet to be able to give us directions and give us recipes and all kinds of things. All of that takes electricity, and the data centers we've had to date support that, and they provide that information instantaneously, essentially, to us. But as we move into the artificial intelligence era, that demand goes way up. A typical data center back a few years ago might have asked for, let's say, 100 megawatts of power, which is a lot of energy. But the AI centers require much more energy than the traditional data centers, on the order of 1,000 megawatts, or what we would call a gigawatt of electricity, or even more. There are some planned for multiple gigawatts of electricity. And that's because the use of artificial intelligence requires just a lot more energy. And an example I'd give you is, if you go on to Google and just do a traditional Google search and tell me what the typical weather is in Columbia, Missouri in July, you'll get an answer back, and it uses a very small amount of energy. If you ask through an AI chat, draw me a picture, show me a picture of my dog driving my car, that takes about 1,000 times as much energy, and actually is enough energy to keep a light on for about 20 minutes. And I don't know about you, but growing up, my mom was always telling me to turn the light off in my room when I left. Those kind of things add up. Think about all the people that go on to ChatGPT or the other platforms and just playing around. Every time they do that, they're requiring as much energy as it takes to keep a light on for 20 minutes. It's just sort of a mind-boggling change in the amount of energy that we're looking for. And as a national security interest, it's a race that we're in with China and others that we can't afford to lose. It's the race you can't come in second in. And so that demand for artificial intelligence and the energy to support that and the magnitude that they are looking for, it's very real and it's very large and it's 24/7. So that's a major effect. Electrification. We're looking at electrifying many forms of transportation. Even there's some areas where they're looking at more electrical heating and things. And all those moves away from fossil fuels to other forms of energy generation that require electricity are also increasing in demand. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we have economic growth. So the main message here is we've been in an area of flat, and this is no longer a steady state. We are actually in an era where we are going to have to find ways to produce a lot more energy, a lot more consistently. And that's what's created the interest in nuclear power. When it comes to adding new advanced reactors, as we call them, to the electricity grid, there are a whole variety of benefits, and I won't belabor each one of these, but the benefits that we see from the current fleet are extended into these advanced reactors by providing long-term stability. The plants can run for years at a time, so they're not subject to the price fluctuations of other fuels that other fuels are. It's a highly reliable 24/7 source, as I've mentioned, that provides a capacity factor that's very high to support those needs for our economy. It can be an efficient use of our transmission resources. We can locate these in areas where the loads are, not requiring the distribution of transmission lines to produce those, to support those. The transmission of the energy from the generation to the load. It's environmentally friendly and zero emissions. And a lot of these new designs, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, have a really great integration with renewables. A lot of states have a lot of wind and a lot of solar, and that means that the supply of energy will ebb and flow over the course of a day or multiple days. These new designs have been designed to pair up with those and be able to ramp the nuclear plant up and ramp it down so that it can match the output, taking advantage of the production of energy from renewables when it's available, and taking advantage of the nuclear generation when it's needed to make up for the gap that is lost when the renewables are not available. And then there's an additional benefit that these new designs are designed such that if there is an interruption in the grid, these plants can be restarted without external sources, which allows them to bring the grid back up faster in times of interruption. So if there's a storm-related effect that takes down a portion of the grid, our current plants, the nuclear plant would have to shut down. These plants can continue to operate, or if they shut down, restart without the grid and help the economy recover locally. So I know there's a presentation later today about all the different technologies. I just want to try and give you a little bit of a picture of the changing landscape of these advanced designs. And there are a couple of important differences. One is in terms of size, and that's listed across the bottom. Our current fleet is made up of plants that are typically on the order of about 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt of electrical output. That's a lot of energy. And they do a great job in providing that power. But the new designs are shifting in a lot of cases towards these smaller designs that take advantage of the smallness of the reactor to make them more simple and establish a even greater level of safety. And then we have another end of the spectrum at the far right of this graph, which are called microreactors, that are very small reactors that can be used in a variety of applications. The oil and gas industry is looking at them, for example, for use in their drilling operations, because they can provide both electricity and steam heat that they can use in drilling operations. And it's sort of ironic that the oil and gas industry that's producing fossil fuels that can produce energy are interested in nuclear, but they'd rather sell the products they produce than consume them in order to pursue drilling. So there's a lot of interest in these smaller reactors. They can also power remote locations, like mining operations or remote villages. There's interest in Alaska and northern Canada to replace diesel generators. And these microreactors are designed so that they can be basically brought in on a truck and delivered, and they can operate for 2, 5, maybe even 10, 20 years before they need to be refueled because of the energy density that they bring to the problem. So there's a range of sizes. The other more technical element of this is how we cool the plants, or how we take the energy out of the reaction that occurs in the reactor. Our current fleet is cooled by water, and that it does a great job of doing that. But some of the new designs are taking advantage of other coolants. Some are cooled by gas reactors. By gas, excuse me. The Europeans have used gas reactors for the last 30 years, and to great effect. They have an advantage in that they can operate at a higher temperature, and that higher temperature can produce higher temperature steam, which can be beneficial in terms of making the plant more efficient. So you get more electricity out of every megawatt of energy you make from the nuclear reaction. And those temperatures of steam can also be used by process industries and industrial applications more readily than the temperatures we traditionally operate our reactors at. So it opens up a whole new set of applications. Similarly, liquid metal reactors. So just think this is molten metal that is used as a coolant, like the water, have similar attributes in that they are more efficient and can also produce higher temperature steam. And then molten salt reactors have the attribute of having high temperatures and a lot of energy storage capacity. So this is where we can, if we use molten salt and we can combine that with other designs if we want, we can store energy so that in those times when the wind and solar is ebbing, we can draw the energy out of that stored energy in the molten salt to be able to provide even more generation than the reactor is generating at that moment in time. So a lot of different types of reactors, and then you'll get a little bit more indoctrination into this afternoon, but a lot of different shapes and sizes that allow us to deploy it in a lot of different ways. So if we look at what's going on today in the United States, this map, there's a lot of information on this map. The main takeaway is there are a lot of dots. And because each of those dots represents a nuclear project that is either planned or underway. It doesn't include the 94 reactors that I mentioned before. It does, but it looks at what's coming. And it also includes Canada. The reason we include Canada in it is that they are working very closely with the United States in deploying U.S. technologies, and in some cases may actually be the first to deploy some of those technologies. There's a project in Toronto right now that's building a U.S. technology that began construction a few months ago. That's the first of a kind. And the United States is working very closely with Canada on that project to make sure that it's something that can be deployed here in the United States. If I showed you this map 5 years ago, there might have been 2 or 3 dots on it. And so the number of dots and symbols we have on here is really an indication of the magnitude of the change that's occurred in the last few years and interest in nuclear around the country. There is a dot there in Missouri, and that is a new project that University of Missouri is looking at related to an enlarged version of the MURR reactor, and so that's in the consideration phase, even here in Missouri. At the federal level, there's been a lot of interest in nuclear, but the states have really come along in jumping in. And this chart just sort of categorizes the kinds of things that states have been undertaking related to nuclear over the past few years. Again, just to give you a little bit of a contrast of how fast this has been coming, 5, maybe 10 years ago, if there were 10 things going on in states related to nuclear, that would be a pretty busy year. Last year, there were over 300 bills introduced in state legislatures related to advanced nuclear, and the interests are just growing every single year. And in this case, I'll just hit sort of quickly on each of these. A lot of states are in the process of exploring nuclear technologies with studies. Some of them are going as far as looking at where they might site them, but also just sort of trying to understand for their state, how might nuclear fit into the energy future for that state? How might advanced nuclear help them reduce transmission needs? How it might help support economic growth and attraction of industries and new loads? And we've listed a number of states there that have taken those actions just in the last couple of years. A number of states have a clean energy standard that they've put in place that was primarily focused on renewables originally. They've gone back and changed those definitions to include nuclear, to recognize it as a clean energy resource. And then other states had various forms of barriers put up, whether it was moratoria or other constraints on building new nuclear, and they've gone back and reversed that. And we've made a lot of progress in states. There are still a few that have moratoria, but almost all of them are conversations about potentially removing those. And then another really important area for a state to consider is how to get in on the supply chain and the technology development. And some of this came up in the beginning today, but nuclear involves an entire supply chain of needs, whether it's building components or it's producing workforces to build and operate these plants. There's a real interest in a number of states, and how do they get into that value chain and how do they take advantage of that? Even if a plant isn't being built here right now, maybe there are ways that Missouri could be engaged that would help us get those plants off the ground somewhere else, and then later on they come back and build the plants here in Missouri. And that spans not just workforce, or not just supply chain, but the workforce needs necessary to deploy these plants. I want to sort of finish here for a minute, and I think Mike and I are going to sit down and have a little bit of a conversation and about what this all means for nuclear as we go forward. Today we have the large plants that provide this reliable, high volume, dense form of energy. But now as we look into the future, we have this whole new spectrum of options that can go from the very small microreactors up into plants that are maybe a half or a third the size of our current fleet. These plants, as I mentioned, can produce both electricity and process heat or high temperature steam for use in different applications. And I didn't mention previously hydrogen. There's big interest in industrially and potentially for other applications using hydrogen. And nuclear, particularly these high temperature applications in nuclear, are very good at producing hydrogen efficiently because the higher temperatures make it a much more efficient conversion of water to hydrogen, which is the way that's generally done. And then that enables a whole variety of uses, whether it's creating sustainable aviation fuel or replacement fuel for vehicles, or it's electrifying rail systems, or even using these high temperature applications to support some of the harder to electrify industries like concrete and steel, and as well as desalination. In the West, there's a huge challenge with water, and so there's a real opportunity that nuclear plants can be used for desalination. So it's a greatly expanded universe of applications that's coming at us, and we're very excited as the nuclear industry to be able to step up and help the nation and Missouri meet the coming energy needs that you have. And with that, I think we're going to sit down and talk for a minute. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And I know I had the opportunity to hear your information yesterday in the House Utilities Committee, and I know they had a lot of interest. And many of those members I saw out in the crowd. Thank you all, and members of the legislature for being here, and everyone for being here. I have jotted down a few questions that others might have, and wanted to ask you about them, to go in a little bit of depth. But one basic question, and I'm a layman in all of this, where is all of this headed, and what's the world going to look like, or where's we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years?
Well, there's a great deal going on right now. We have 4 plants, 4 of these advanced designs that are actually under construction right now, and we expect those to be coming online here around the end of the decade. And that'll really start to set the foundation for these new technologies to be able to move forward. I think we just completed 2 plants in the last few years down in Georgia. They are sort of somewhere between the advanced plants and the existing fleet, in that they're a large plant, but it takes advantage of a lot of inherent safety features that makes the plant, again, more simple and safer. And those plants have come online and run extremely well, and demonstrating that even a new design can come on and produce that high capacity factor output to support those. With this new growth in demand, I think we will expect to see some plants like that also being ordered, even the large plants, because the magnitude of the demand that's coming at us. So those have not yet been ordered, but I believe in the next year or two, we're going to see a number of those launched. And the President of the United States actually issued an executive order at the end of May that called for 10 large plants being under construction by the end of the decade. So there's interest in making that happen, I think, on the utility side and the customer side for the load, and on the federal side to see that happens.
It's obvious we're in a very rapidly changing world and environment. What do you think the public perception is right now of all of this?
Yeah, nuclear public perception is a very interesting subject, and we've done a lot of studying of this over the last 5 years. And the way I like to capture it is that everybody thinks their neighbor doesn't like nuclear. That if you actually engage people and ask them, where are you on nuclear and its role in the future, well over half support nuclear being continuing and growing as we go forward. There's a small sliver, maybe 10% or less, mostly of the older generation, that are opposed to nuclear. But the majority in the United States and even around the world are quite supportive of nuclear. And I think it's for the attributes that were mentioned earlier, the reliability, the emissions free. And there is a generational gap, but other than that small fraction that are adamantly opposed, it's pretty much across all of the age groups that the support exists. And I think it's just one of those things that there's for a generation there's been concern about nuclear and the connection to weapons and things, which these plants have nothing to do with nuclear weapons. That people think, well, other people wouldn't like it, and so I'm not sure I want to say I like it. But if you get them to actually engage, they're individually they are supportive, but they're worried that their neighbors won't support it. And I think we got to get over that. This industry spent better part of 40 years being largely invisible, and I think we're in a sort of reemergence phase here, where things like this, where we can interact with the public and talk about the advantages of nuclear, what it does, what it brings to the communities, what it brings to the nation, is really important. And we wouldn't have done this probably 5 years ago, but it's definitely time. And I think we're finding that the support is really there.
And as you talk about those public perceptions, one thing that sometimes comes up is waste, like what happens there. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah. This is another one, and pop culture can be brutal. The Homer Simpson characterization of nuclear energy and the green goo that exists, that's the waste. Couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, I can actually flip that and say, I would say nuclear is by far the most responsible industry in knowing exactly where our waste is, in controlling it, in putting it into a condition where it has no effect and no ability to affect the environment. And that today largely is in the form of fuel that's been taken out of the reactor and put into what we call dry storage, which means there's no water being used to cool it anymore. The air is all that's needed to cool it. And these are big, robust, they're about 30 feet tall, maybe 10 feet wide, concrete cylinders generally. Some are underground, some are above ground, some are horizontal, some are vertical, but they're basically just sitting there with the air moving through to cool them. And that can be kept in that condition for at least 100 years. And maybe at the end of 100 years, we'd have to take them out and repackage them. That's fine, that could be done. But there's nothing going on there. There's really nothing to it. And we've even gone so far, I was part of in my resume, there was a mention to 9/11. One of the things my company was involved in was looking at the potential for aircraft impact. We actually analyzed it and saw that even if you hit it directly with a large commercial aircraft, there would be no release of radioactivity. And in fact, many years ago, Los Alamos lab took a transport cask, which was what you would move this material with, that on a rail car, and ran a train into it to prove there would be no damage to that cask by a train running into it. So the pop culture lore of this scary nuclear waste just really doesn't exist. There is a need in the long run to have a place to put it. And but in the interim, there is no issue. These basically are parking lots. They're paved areas that have each of these casks sitting there, a little bit of instrumentation on them to keep track of what's going on. But they can sit there for a long time. The deal that was made when we started nuclear energy was that the government would take that fuel at the end of the day. And the federal government hasn't yet decided how they want to do that. Now, interestingly, one of those executive orders that I mentioned that came out in May from President Trump includes in it a renewed interest in let's find the pathway. So I think they have 240 days to do that. The Department of Energy is working on that. to try and step up to the federal government's commitment to take that material from the fleet and dispose of it. It's not a technical problem. Sweden, Finland's actually, I think this month, starting to use their deep geologic repository to store their waste deeply underground. Sweden is in the process of building. Canada just picked a site and is about to do that. Many countries are actively working this problem and solving it. The United States just hasn't stepped up to do that.
Very interesting, and just seeing just the changes in perception, and then the facts versus the perceptions. Changing gears just a little bit. In your last slide, you talked a little bit about the economic impacts, and can you go into that just a little bit more, just like maybe in a macro sense, but then what kind of secondary impacts can there also be as far as economic impacts?
Yeah, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about, I don't know, maybe you have a question on this, but about cost of plants, because they a little bit tie together. So let's just talk about the economic benefits of a nuclear plant and tie that back to attitudes. When we do our polling on public attitudes, one of the things we do is we make sure we get a sampling of different locations to get a good representative sample. And these are not like a poll that only involves 100 people. There are thousands of people involved in the polls. What we find is the people that are close to nuclear plants are actually the most supportive because they see the benefits, the economic benefits of those plants. The current fleet pay a very large amount of local taxes. Many of the local communities, police forces, fire departments are funded by those taxes that are paid there. The schools are improved because of that. You're bringing in, a large number of professionals that help improve the education levels, and those permeate through. In the sad days when a plant has had to shut down in the past, it's decimating to those local communities. That's true for a nuclear plant. Particularly true because we employ a large number of people, but it's also true of a coal plant. If you shut down a coal plant, all those jobs go away, that tax revenue goes away, and it can be devastating to that local area. So one of the things we've looked at is if a coal plant does have to shut down because it's reached the end of its life, how could you repurpose that workforce? And a study was done that showed that probably 75% of that workforce could be retrained. One of the misconceptions of nuclear energy is that, maybe this comes from Homer Simpson, that it's a bunch of people running around in white lab coats and nuclear engineers with PhDs. We have those people, and they're really important because they're the ones who figure out how to make that reactor make heat. But the vast majority of the staff are not nuclear engineers. We employ all administrative folks, trades as part of that. So that's why you can actually, take an electrician who's worked at a coal plant, and they can be converted. Even an operator could be converted to an operator at a nuclear plant, especially for these advanced reactors, because the operation is so simple. So I think there's a real opportunity in cases where, and I'm not advocating that coal plants are shut down. I'm just saying that if that happens, you can actually transition that workforce and save that community from the decimation associated with that shutdown. So it's very significant to the local community, and even at the state level, it's noticed. And we've had states intervene to help save plants because they saw the economic impact that the state would feel if that plant had shut down. So let me talk about cost of nuclear, and that wasn't exactly part of your question, but it's one of the things that has to be addressed. One of the arguments against nuclear is that it's too expensive. And while we've had a history in the United States of challenges in getting projects completed, there's also a pretty clear explanation and evidence of how that could be avoided. And I'll just sort of start this way. I mentioned that we just finished 2 plants in Georgia in the last couple of years. Those plants were the first in 30 years to come online. We hadn't built a nuclear plant in 30 years. We'd lost all of the capabilities, the knowledge of how to manage and run those plants. We had other intervening challenges that came along associated with the particular design, and then the COVID pandemic in the middle of that. And those plants took a long time to get online, but it was the first of a kind. And if we continue down a path of building one plant here of this type and one plant over there of another type, the costs will not come down. But if you look at countries like China and South Korea and Russia and Japan, who have consistently built plants, they get better and better at it, and the costs come down greatly. Department of Energy just published a report last year that I think said they basically cut in roughly half over time by the time you continue to build them. And the Japanese in the early 2000s, when they were building, or in late 1990s, when they were building, they were completing plants in about 3.5 years, not the 10 or 15 years that typically gets associated with nuclear. So if this country decides, as it seems to be trending towards, that we want to go build more nuclear to meet this energy demand, those costs are going to come down because we'll have the capabilities, we'll have the workforce to support it, and we'll have the supply chains established to be able to do that. The Chinese have seen that. Chinese are building 10 nuclear plants a year. By the end of this decade, they're going to have more nuclear plants than the United States. 20 years ago, they had just a handful. They've bought into this, and they're going forward, and then they've also committed now to double that fleet by 2040. So they're all in, and they're seeing that economic advantage of doing this over and over again, and each one gets faster, and each one gets cheaper.
As we've been discussing this morning, and from Governor Kehoe to Director Schaefer, there's a lot of positive energy in this room, no pun intended. But what, and not wanting to dampen that, but what is the biggest hurdle?
I think it actually comes back, in my opinion, to the initial cost of the first ones. Because there's a risk associated with undertaking a large multi-billion-dollar investment. And nuclear, because it takes some time to construct, 5+ years, up to 10 years, things happen and intervene. And the example in Georgia was they were trucking along on building this plant, and they ended up with the COVID pandemic hitting them in the middle of it. And then all of a sudden, workers couldn't be less than 6 feet apart. And it's pretty hard to undertake construction activities when you're trying to meet separation protocols. You can have your own opinions about whether those should have been instituted, but it affected their ability to actually do it. So the longer these take, the more exposure you have to risks. So that's why also doing it multiple times, we'll get faster at it, those risks will reduce. And so the first of a kinds have unknowns that we haven't actually built something. And it's about getting companies comfortable with the fact that they can undertake that and not take on a risk, a significant risk. The federal government is working on that. A bill was introduced last year, late last year, by Senator Risch, a very conservative senator, looking at how the government might be able to provide some sort of federal backstop to help protect the ratepayers, so that if that cost overruns, it doesn't get passed on to the ratepayers. It didn't get voted on, but we expect it to be reintroduced this year. I think something like that at the federal level would really help companies be able to say, okay, I can be sure my ratepayers aren't going to have to foot this entire bill. I'm willing to move forward and build this plant and make it happen. We do have a couple of plants, as I mentioned, that are under construction. Their demonstrations, they're being funded 50% by the federal government. So those will proceed, and we'll get to see those come. But in order to get to scale, we really need to get to the point where we've got companies confident that these plants can be delivered on schedule and on budget. And that means getting out of the blocks for the first few.
Well, thanks, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge this morning. And I think we have time for one more question. And you've been in the industry working with this topic for 40 years and have just probably seen it all, so to speak. Why are we having this conversation now? Why is now the right time to have this conversation?
Well, I think, and I have been in this industry a long time. I actually got into it by accident. I'm a chemical engineer who ended up in a company that had a nuclear division and got assigned to it, and then ended up sticking for 45 years. I can say that there has been no more exciting time to be in the industry than right now. I think that there are a lot of factors lining up that make nuclear make a lot of sense. This need for the consistent, reliable power that industrial loads and the data centers and AI centers have, it's a perfect fit. Concern about emissions is another factor that plays into some people's considerations. The emission-free aspect of nuclear is really positive. And I think we've also benefited from a lot of the innovation that's gone into these new designs that have come up with smarter, clever, cheaper ways to do things that we didn't have maybe years ago. And I think also finally, public perception has changed. I talked about how I see it today. 20 years ago, it was not like that. There was a little bit more reticence on nuclear. I think we're in a better position from a public support perspective as well.
Well, thank you. And Doug, thank you for sharing your knowledge and really setting a great foundation for the rest of the day and discussions the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.